when we move on to things like free motion quilting, and free motion quilting, I like to think of that as drawing on the fabric. If you had a piece of paper and you wanted to draw a picture, you're moving your pen around the paper. When you do free motion, imagine this pen being your needle on the machine, and all the needle can do is go up and down. So now when I'm doing free motion, I'm actually having to move my paper under this needle. Well, I'm not coordinated to be able to do both. That's like that trick where you tap the head and rub the belly. I can't quite do that yet. But so I'm going to imagine this is moving up and down at the same time I'm moving my paper. So as you're quilting, you have to draw your design by moving the paper and keeping your pen stationary, meaning the needle going up and down. So how do you accomplish that? Well, one of the things that makes that job a little bit easier is not using the feed dogs. You don't want the machine to move your fabric. You want to have the control to move the fabric yourself. So you need to lower your feed dogs. Some machines don't have the ability to lower the feed dogs, but they come with a plate that covers the feed dogs, so it's a smooth, flat surface. Again, some machines don't even have that option because, again, depending on how old the machine is or what the purpose of the machine was when you bought it, it may or may not have that option. Most quilting machines today, or sewing machines that are made for the purpose of quilting today, will have the ability to close off the feed dogs. But if your machine does not give you that option, and you've gone to the repair shops and the sewing machine places, and they're telling you, oh, we don't make one for that model, the option you have at that point is to take a piece of cardboard or something, even plastic, whatever you can modify, and put something that covers them manually. Tape it to your machine. I mean, these are just some ways to get around it. They may not be perfect, but they will help. The idea is you don't want the feed dogs touching your fabric. So whatever you can do to modify your machine, if without damaging the machine, of course. I'm not recommending that you start creating things that are going to cause problems. The next thing that you need is what some people refer to as a darning foot. I don't know if you can see this up close. Let's just kind of give you a flip. The darning foot is kind of a weird looking foot as well, but it has a real serious purpose. This is certainly the way it screws onto the machine in this direction. So this is where your screw is to attach your feet, and this little pin rests above the screw that holds your needle in. So as your needle goes up and down, this spring action, I don't know if I can make it work in my hand, but there's a spring action that happens in here. Here we go. So as the needle moves up and down, this little spring picks the foot up and moves it up and down on the machine, in a way. But what this does, in this one in particular, can you zoom in, has a closed darning foot. I actually bought a second one and modified it myself and had that opening cut out. Some darning feet are automatically open. I found having the open one made it easier for me to see what I was doing, and it also helped me pull my thread tails out easier than the tiny little hole here. Some of them are circular. This one happens to be oval. Again, I don't know if you can see that. Anyway, the purpose of this foot now, when you're using the free motion, we've got our feed dogs either covered or lowered, and the darning foot then will just kind of float along across the fabric. It really has very little pressure against the fabric itself, because again, you want that fabric to move freely so that you can draw and make your little designs as you go along. Loops and circles, and pretty much the sky's the limit when it comes to free motion. If you're just starting out with free motion, I recommend practicing on a piece of paper and this is what I call train the brain. I don't know if I can get this on camera without, I need something to write on. Let's see if we can just put it up against this book. Basically, let's say I wanted to make loops. Now this will be really talented if I can do this backwards, right? And you're just basically making loops. And you're practicing this, and you're going over and over and over and over. And if you wanted to reverse it and reverse it, this is a really simple exercise of train my brain to make the design I want. If I want to do something more on the lines of stippling, ready, backwards and on camera. starting out with a little puzzle piece, and we just kind of wiggle ourselves around. And now this is a pretty tight design, which would be more along the lines of stippling, but there are no rules that say you can't cross a line, although the purist will tell you you're not supposed to. The idea is you're supposed to make your little design just kind of wiggling along so that nothing crosses over, and it's very hard to tell your start and stop. The difference between a stipple and a meander is a stipple is very tiny, very tight. A meander is very loose. If you're new to this process, take a piece of paper and literally sit down and do the little doodles, doodle, 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 back and forth and up and down and in a circular, horizontal, whatever direction you want to go. There's no rules. The idea is to figure out a path that will allow you not to get stuck in a corner. Now you can see the one next to it is a little bit wider. My notes from the background are showing through, but that's a little bit wider, so now you see the difference between a stipple and a meander. And there again, no rules. How big do I make my meander? How tiny do I make my stipple? It's what you're comfortable with. I really don't stress on making it perfect. People stress over it's got to be tiny, it's got to be tight, I can't cross a line. Yes, you can. I don't call those mistakes. I call those design choices. And to be honest, when somebody looks at the quilt, if you cross a line here or there or everywhere, so what? Nobody's going to stop and go, oh my gosh, that's stippling and you crossed the line. That's against the law. I'm going to call the quilt police. There will be no quilt police that will knock on your door. We all have to practice. And with practice and repetition, we improve. Every quilt you make teaches you something. Every quilt you make will be better than the last quilt. And if you're a perfectionist, like I think I've run across a few in quilting, quite a few, including myself, we tend to criticize our own work more so than anyone else ever will. And my very first quilt that I made taught me that lesson, and I will stress that lesson I used to always grab my quilts and people go, wow, you made that quilt. Wow, look at how fabulous that looks. And I go, yeah, but look a little closer. Did you see this? Did you see this? And look at where I made a mistake here, and this point didn't match, and I crossed my lines over here, and I didn't mean to do that. No, 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 no. That does not happen. You don't point those out. Those are things that you know about, and only you, and who cares? So my thoughts on that for today are just think of them as this. There are no mistakes in quilting, only design choices. You meant to do that. That's part of what you wanted to do. And that'll help you alleviate some of that guilt. Don't worry about it. Move on. If you really dislike the results of a quilt, plenty of shelters and charity organizations will accept your quilts without question. I've never had a recipient at a shelter point out mistakes to me or turn down a quilt because it wasn't perfect. So